Welcome back to Soul to Soul. My name is Wayne Marentette. I am your host. This is number 12 of the series. The first three were about Wayne, and starting with sentiency all the way through to ascension, I find myself here with you today. We're going to talk about paradigms today in conclusion, and there's a lot more to go beyond that, but I want to start with the idea of paradigms and introduce it into your life so that you have an understanding. But before we begin, I've got a story. I heard this story when I was in the hospital years and years ago, probably 38 years ago, and it stuck with me. It was a great story. I thought, well, if I ever get the chance talking to people, I'm going to somehow use this story. So here's the story. There is a master, and he's living in his compound, and he has beautiful grounds to go out and walk in every day. It's about a 2-mile trip for him to go from inside the temple, around the grounds and back. But he likes to do this because he runs into locals along the way, people who are not within the monastery itself or within the school system, but they like to hang around outside, and he likes to see their progress. So one day he goes out for a walk, and he takes some 20 to 30 of his young disciples, and they go for a walk. And the first man they come upon, they stop, they look, and they notice, well, there's this man, and he's an elderly man, and he's naked, and he's sitting in a mound of dung and ants, and they're biting him. And all the aspirants are looking at him, wondering what is going on. The master doesn't say a word. But the man getting eaten by the ants, he calls out to the master. He says, "Oh, master, please tell me, how many more lives do you think I have to live?" The master looks at him and he says, "Next time I check, or I check in, I'll find out. I'll come by and I'll let you know." "Oh, thank you, master." Ooh, and he's getting bitten. And he walks along. Near the end of the track, before they start to turn around, they run into someone else. Only this time, there's this huge tree, some 1,000 years old, thick at the base, probably 3 feet thick, and it overhanging leaves are thousands and thousands of beautiful leaves. And there's this young man underneath the tree, and he's doing a dance and a jig, and he's singing, and he's laughing, and he doesn't have any instruments, and there isn't any backup. He's all alone. And he sees the master come by, and he waves at him. "Hello, master." He walks up to him, and he says, "Master, could you do me a favor?" And the master says, "Well, certainly. What can I do for you?" He said, "Well, I'd like to know, how many more lives do I have?" He said, "Well, I will check in, and the next time I see you, I'll let you know what I found out." "Oh, great, super." He runs under the tree, and they take off, and they go back to the abbey. Well, a couple days later, the master decides to go for a walk again, and the same disciples, of course, they want to see what's going to happen, so they follow him. And when they get to the first guy who's sitting in the anthill, and he's getting bitten and chewed up all over the place, and he walks up to him and he says, "I am responding to your question you asked me 2 days ago when I came by." "Oh, thank you, master, thank you. How many more lives do I have to live?" And the master says, "Only 17 more. Oh, 17 more? Thank you, master." And the master smiles and walks on. The students are a little bit concerned, but they get to the tree, which is halfway around the court. And when they get there, there's that young man under the tree, still dancing, singing, running around the tree. He runs over to the master and says, "Master, did you find out, please? Did you find out how many more lives?" The master said, "Oh, yes, I did." He said, "How many more, master?" He says, "As many as the leaves that you can count on that tree." He looks at the tree and says, "That's it?" And the master says, "Yes, that's it." He goes, "Great!" And he jumps for joy, and he's leaping. And as they turn around to go to the abbey, the master is still looking. The students have stopped because suddenly all the leaves from the tree have fallen to the ground. End of story. Okay. I want to incorporate this story as we go, since we're talking about paradigms. Each of us aspiring to become one with God, aspiring to achieve the highest potential of attainment, light body attainment in our lifetimes, finds ourselves in these situations where we wonder, like Gautama Buddha in his early days, When he first went out, he wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he knew that he felt compassion for the poor, and there had to be another methodology that he could find. He starved himself to death for years, almost 7 years. He went without food, very, very little, lived an isolated life. And that didn't work. He tried quite a few things until suddenly it hit him one day, like the guy under the tree. It doesn't matter how long it takes or what the methodology is. Being the living truth yourself is enough. Wow. He went out and studied, and as you know the story of Buddha, he became enlightened through his process and went on to try to instruct the kings and the kingdoms and the warlords in the area how they can change their life for the better. But we have this original story of some guy sitting in an ant pit and being bit by ants, suffering deep, deep renunciation, which is the key of the story. Should we go into complete renunciation, give up everything, give it all away to everyone so that we have no desires, no attachments, nothing to cling to, nothing other than our greatest passion for union? Well, the answer is basically do it rationally, but yeah, you have to give up all of your corruptible, all the dark side, all your dark tendencies. That's part of that paradigm, the dark paradigm of self-service, selfishness. We have to give all of that up in order to achieve. But sitting in an ant pit is not going to get you there faster. Suffering pain and having no reaction to it will not get you there. But certainly, non-reaction helps a lot in life. When we see someone acting negatively, rather than overreact or have an adverse reaction or make a judgment, we're better to train ourselves to see the real truth. That most of the personalities we run into are unevolved. They haven't completed their task naturally. That's why they're still here. That's why we're here. So, as we move towards advancing our soul, we find out things like detachment and letting go and putting on, and we hear these terms. But it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything in your life to those ends. What it means is be rational, like the guy under the tree. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Be happy, and your task is done. His enlightenment came to him naturally, like a brick falling from the sky, hitting him on the head. He became enlightened simply because he lived in joy, in love, and understanding, and acceptance. And his joy was, he was spreading it where he could. And that's the whole idea of the story, is that our path begins at home, in our heart, with each one of us. I'd like you to imagine, if you would, the way I see it, a small child. And let's take that child and say he's 5 years old, a male. But let's look at him as a soul, just a light being. You can think of him as a sphere of light, an integrated sphere of light, or a fully formed human light expression. So he's giving off a lot of light from himself, and it's a soul. Now I want you to think, this is how we begin. Each one of us comes in with the equipment, the attributes, the organs of perception, the senses, and if we're reasonably healthy, we have a great start to life, because now we get to gather information, process it, bring it into our life, and then act on that information. Hopefully knowledge leads to wisdom, leads to clarity, just as attention and integrity will lead to a principled nature, or overcoming things that lack conscience will lead us back to our conscientiousness. This is the same story. Every one of us has a will when we are born, whether it's noticeable or not. Your free will is a major part of your life. Now, the universe places us in light bodies that put us into a human form. And when we start life, we have this will, the will to choose, to act, to be, to live, to love, to know. So we go on about our lives. And during that journey, we find out that based on our willful choices that we make every minute throughout our day, our month, our week, our month, our year, we end up where we end up. Ask yourself at home today, are you where you are because of your will? The answer is yes. You are where you are because of your will choices. Now, that doesn't mean that somehow you fell into a set of circumstances living with a dysfunctional family such as I did, So now I have to understand that process, but that doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you have now the free will to choose how to see, how to believe, or what to believe, and to see things as they are. By the end of the life, we have the accumulation of information in a single soul, and that soul's choice to act, behave, and to be is, let's say, assessed in the ascension process. Now, you can line up 1,000,000 souls, each start with the same equipment, the same attributes, the same ability, and you might have, say, 10% that decide to venture towards spirituality in a more sincere way. So by the end of their life, they've made some gains in insight, inspiration, and perhaps some of them may even achieved integration or mastery. We'll take the other 90%, and we'll say that maybe another 30% of those just lived a moral life and tried to keep their life balanced as best as they could, but didn't really get to know or understand much about their soul. But innately, they made choices relative to their conscience, whether they knew it or not, that kept them in the fold of what I would call humility and modesty and decency. So now we have another group, let's say the other 60%, or that would make it 50% or 60%, and they don't necessarily have the will to satisfy their desires, achieve the goals that they felt were within their reach, to try to attain to some measure of success. Most of them do that through education. Well, not all of them do, but what this group does is they advance by their will, end up where they are, but they blame others. They think others are at fault, and the reason why their life is where it is as a victim is because these others acted on them and they had no choice but to overreact and to fall into depression or anger, frustration. So you see, what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter who you are. The way the universe sees it, you're a soul, you're given everything you need, and then when you return, what did you do with your will? And that's the big question you have to ask yourself. What did you do with your will? Did you understand your own nature while you're alive? To the degree that you did understand, that's to the degree the treasure you will collect in heaven. If you didn't understand much, well, let me explain it this way. I see three groups of people in the world. A, those that accept the truth, begin to act on it, and understand it and manifest it in their life. They become agents of truth, beings of light that express the truth of their own beingness to others. So that's the accepting group. They've accepted 100% now that they have understood it. Then there's a B group. They reject everything. They want nothing to do with the soul, spirit, science, God, attainment. They don't care about selflessness or selfishness. They're only interested in one thing: what's in their best interest, period. And to some degree, there are some who go even further, and they become absolute rejectionists. So we have those who accept completely, those who reject completely, and then the majority of population that's in the middle. We'll call that the middle ground, but it's really a fence. Each choice you make puts you closer to the light or further from it. A lot of people are sitting on the fence wondering, should I go ahead and take things that don't belong to me? Should I manipulate others so I can get ahead? And they could fall on the dark path, but they don't. And should I advance as a soul? They sit in the middle where it's comfortable being a human. So they don't accept their soul or reject it, but they wonder. And that's what happens in every choice we have: accept, reject, or wonder. If you're a wanderer sitting on the fence, it means you still haven't made the choice to either A, start the process, self-discovery, or to learn a little bit and leave it at that. Some will go a little bit further. Eventually, one gets tired of sitting on the fence. They see those that have accepted and how their life looks. They see those who have rejected. It scares them. They don't go that way either. So they take the middle path. I'll just stay here until I can find faith. Faith comes along and they sit on the fence with a little more strength. And they don't necessarily fall off, but they have leaning towards the right. And that's the way I see people. When I meet them, they have either understood themselves or not, and to what degree. So when I look at a person, I look for solutions. I see where they stand, what isn't finished, and I offer them that solution. But I've never met, or I've only actually met one that was attained, didn't need any information or help from me whatsoever. In fact, it was that individual was progressing the way I would like to have at the time. They were fully integrated and fully accepting, and proved to me that that lifestyle was much easier to achieve than the dark. And I actually proved that one night to a group of people. But getting back to the story, we are here in a process that allows us to advance as thinkers, as souls, to become aware of ourselves, our true nature. Now, I've always held that if you really want to understand humanity, you start with yourself. What you know about yourself can be proven to be true about everyone else alive if you're willing to go out and try to make that evidence fit into your view. Are we all the same? Yes, we have the same senses, the same capacity. Some of us can be a little brighter or less bright, but we have the same attributes and qualities. So there's nothing stopping us from advancing on the path and being who we want to be, our true self. Again, others that don't want to know are the ones that are subjected to the most amount of pain and suffering in their life. Those who advance towards the light suffer less uncertainty. They suffer less when they're accused, because you can't accuse an honest person of being dishonest. They'd probably be willing to talk to you about it, but you'd be incorrect in assuming that they were dishonest, because they are not. What I'm saying is that when you have your life together, when you have your integrity, there's no one that's going to call you in the middle of the night. There's nothing to worry about. There's no one coming to your door. All you have to do is live in your integrity and keep adding to that every day with one inspiration after another. And soon you'll find out that you can prove that you are a living light being, here to complete the process and move on. However, it hasn't been taught to us that way, and that's the biggest problem of all. Most of us have been led to believe that through birth we've created our first original sin, and that we should be ashamed of ourselves, that we should feel in some way submissive to authority, to those more advanced than us. So sin, shame, guilt tended to manage people for quite a long time. If you look back over the last 2,000 years, I'll say the Roman Catholic Church has been in charge for roughly about 1,700 of those years. And if I look at the quality of life over those last 1,700 years, I see great suppression of women, of spirit, of conscience, and I see guilt being favored as a tool to use to punish people. The church was big on critical, complaintive, and punishing tendencies. They took it out on the population that wasn't Catholic. If you weren't Catholic, you might have died, or you might have been tested, brought to trial, burned at the stake, or you would have to pay taxes for a long time. It was never pleasant. Unless you fit into their lifestyle, there's nothing else you could do. In fact, I looked at the time when the Romans were in charge, and around the same time before they created the Catholic Church, and I recognized a definite pattern that through the suppression of humanity and guilting humanity, they were able to maintain a control over humanity, even when they started the church, the Roman Catholic Church. The information they brought in and selected to put in a specific Bible was then edited and printed eventually. It was written for a long number of years and then brought out to the public. But the view that they brought out was their view. Now, I go back to the very beginning when I said we're all souls in a process leading to an attainment. And that in itself is a paradigm. We have choices when we come into this world. Paradigm of love, selflessness, service, and attainment. Or the paradigm of darkness, self-service, selfishness, and lack of concern for humanity in general. So I find myself sitting here saying there is light and there is darkness, and by your will you choose to be attracted to or unattracted to to act out and to become like one or the other. Well, through life you get those choices, and you know yourselves. Most of you have had to make a choice to either maintain your morality, maintain your conscience, and back away from opportunity that is dark, and to live in the light at your own expense. And it is your own expense because it is a solitary journey. You can ask others to help you, but most are not going to be favoring you. They'll favor themselves first. This is the process. But when the church interfered and brought out their instructions to humanity and acted as intercessors on behalf of humanity, their religion caused people to wonder about their dogma, and eventually some protested. Now we have Protestants. And in that protest, they thought, well, we can't be thinking that God's going to give someone forgiveness of sins simply because they paid the priest a few dollars or he gave real estate to the church. That's what happened. And the Protestants said, no, this is not right. They forgot the original message. Love, understanding, tolerance, patience, sharing, goodness towards each other. But the goal was about finding something inside you. When Jesus was alive, he taught them a thing called the way. If you look in ancient manuscripts, even in the first century, before it became so-called Christianity, it was called the way. And the way was your will. The way was instructed as a methodology of attainment, much like I'm giving you today. By your will, you choose one way or another, one path or another. The objective was to choose the path less trodden, which was the more difficult one, which meant overcoming and becoming true to yourself. Where the left-hand path was the common path of humanity, everyone followed that. So only once in a while would a person venture off the path because of the way it was taught. If we had learned from the beginning that, A, the kingdom of heaven is within, that would mean what? That would mean that the presence is within you, that all your communion with yourself can be upgraded to talk to your soul. Can you talk to your soul? I do. Can you talk to your spirit? I have. Can we talk to God? Constantly. There's nothing stopping us except for our own inhibition and our own lack of experience in that very avenue. If we haven't tried to commune with the presence at heart, then we wouldn't know much about it. It would be hearsay. But since then, things have changed. Now the way to get into, or to attainment to get into heaven, is by faith and grace alone. So by faith, you believe in Jesus. God gives us grace. Next thing you know, we've been born again. Not so. What does born again mean? In reality, it means you have reverted back to your true nature. And once it's complete, then you're born again. In other words, if you become positive, altruistic, objective, you overcome all the dark tendencies, CCP, lack of conscience, immorality, corruptibility, and that's all avoided. And you're simply living a life of acceptance, understanding, and compassion and love, and you have communion with God. Well, then in that moment when you have confirmed and begin to communicate with that holy presence in your heart, that is the beginning of the process of being born again. When it's complete, you'll know, because a transition occurs. And we can all depend. There's an actual event that occurs in each person's life who strives to become enlightened or to integrate their soul and to get into heaven. And it is that they become wiser. And that change in disposition, attitude, the way we see life, the way we evaluate others, is the transition. So if I'm standing next to someone who says I'm an attained soul, and we look at a crowd of people, what do they see versus what do I see? Well, we should see the same thing, that these are all young personalities endowed with a soul who are either doing really well or not so well. And they all need help to finish their goal, because no one's telling them about the process itself. We've been left to think that you only have to believe in an individual or have faith that it's possibly true. Beyond that, trust. Some of us want proof. I was one of those. Even as a child, I always had to have proof. I couldn't just accept something that I couldn't tangibly sense, feel, or understand. It wasn't within my realm of experience. So for me, when I discovered the truth, even after I discovered it, I still had to go out of my way to try to disprove it. And in doing that, I found even more evidence. So the truth can be looked at and thought over, if you will, by yourself. And you can find that you can advance. And if you discover a truth or an inspiration you want to confirm, and you attempt to disprove it, you find even more evidence for it. So I know that any soul who wants to advance, who transitions into the positive side of their nature, is magnifying their soul and eventually will manifest their soul in their body, which is the objective. Now, most people think, oh, when you die, you leave, you get there, and there's a judgment, and then they give you a white gown if you make it. If not, you go to the dark side. That's a standard belief for a lot of Christians in the world today, but it's not the whole truth. It's part of it. Yeah, the judgment occurs. That happens while you're alive. Your judgment is based on your acts of will, your willful choices, your willful decisions, your willful beliefs. The things you chose to believe, that was by your will. So when you're done, the assessment is, do you understand your own nature? Some will say to a degree, others will say yes. Those who don't understand their own nature, well, we can see why they didn't spend much time looking at it. They were distracted and looked at other things, which is the most normal thing to do when you're an evolving personality. It may take time for people to attain because they need more and more time, more and more evidence, and they're not easily drawn into it. For others, it's efficient, it's quick. They want to know right away. I was one of those. I believed in God when I was 5 years old. I trusted it so much that I would go to sleep at night, and before I went to sleep, I talked to God. In deep silence, I waited for answers, inspirations, or just a change in demeanor so I could keep my peace, my balance, my resolve, and then get on to school the next day. We've all been through that. So why do we do this? Because it's the most natural thing to do. We find that with a sense of morality, of conscientiousness, the attributes that are hidden at heart, that are divine, start to come up to the surface, and we get tendencies and desires that when we notice them, we can qualify them. That's a dark desire. That's a selfless desire. Help others, take advantage. Make it easy for others, or walk away, leave it to them. Either be of value or ignore everyone. These are simple choices that we make on an hour-to-hour basis, but we don't see it as a paradigm, and that's exactly what it is. All souls coming into this world are stuck with a paradigm of will. It's your will that drives you in this life, or your choices that drive you closer and closer to making more and more greater decisions. And once that's been made, that's what you add up to. So how I see it is, all the souls coming into this world, before they come, they know we're here to engage in experience, get an education on the true nature of the quality of life in this dimension. When we understand that, we're ready for the next dimension, the next set of experiences, and so on and so on. But this is the only one that you'll have to experience separation and ignorance, darkness, aloneness, fear as an illusion, and of course our instincts that tend to manage and control us for a large part of our life. That's this dimension. So there are some hurdles, there are some obstacles, and we take away religion. We see the key process is go into your heart, discover your heart as a source of not just information, but a source of clear inspiration, a source of direct insight, direct realizations, revelations. That's our process. If you are open to discover your true nature, if it's put before you and you can consider it, you will advance towards it, and the gains you make will help you determine whether you'll stick with it or switch to the other side or just sit on the fence. But that is our position, and it's a paradigm. What I'm saying is that we're in a paradigm, I call it the restoration of the conscience of humanity. And in this process, I've been watching for the last 150 years, but in the last, let's say, 30 years, there's been some real progress. I can even go back to the 50s before radio and TV and say that people were a lot more, let's say, in the moment before television and radio came along. At 9 years old, I saw the TVs coming into the neighborhood, and I saw the changes in the families and the children and the parents in the neighborhood. People became more materialistic. The younger ones became more emotional. And then the 60s happened. We were free. We had just come out of the war. We had settled our differences. People were starting to think about a positive future. Religion had played a role in their life, but that's when religion started to fall out. People started to get wise as to who was correct about lifestyle approaches. And they didn't see the merits in condemning people and putting them down and making them feel guilty and having to go to confession to confess their sins on a weekly basis and to pay for that upkeep by someone who is supposedly already integrated and one with God, the Vicar of Christ, the Pope. Well, since the 60s, things have really, really changed. I saw people expand their consciousness, grow in love, and then as it ended, a new music industry came in along with a new generation and a new drive, and it was materialism. So we see a young aspirant going through changes, emotional changes, maturity changes that take them from one level of desire to another. Our desire nature in our life is largely responsible for our attainment or a lack of in our lifetime. So let's call it a paradigm. If you lived a life through multiple decades where you found your morality, maintained it, hung on to it, and cost you to hang on to that, then you know what I'm talking about. It's worth everything to save your soul and to give up the world. There's nothing to gain by hanging on to the world and looking for more from it. You're not going to get the quality of life that you would like in a spiritual world. You won't get that here. So most of us want this advanced opportunity for immortality without realizing we already are immortal. It's true. Our light, our photonic light, is eternal. We're not temporal, mortal, accepting our body. We have a mortal condition, and we're under moral parole, you could say. But from the universal perspective, it's different. It's seen as advanced spirits, highly advanced spirits like you and myself. We each have our own spirit on the other side that is projected through this body and the vehicle that we call the soul, senses, sentiency, into a human body and looking out with eyes and ears to see and hear and feel and touch and know. When we leave our body, we return to the soul. The soul then returns to the spirit. And either we return with our integrated personality or return with an unintegrated personality. Either way, the personality and the soul do become one at death. Then it moves up to the spirit where the next what they call the second death occurs. And that's the etheric body. So what I'm going to say is this. When we came into this world, we were subjected to the conditions of this world, the environment, the frequencies, the rhythms, the patterns, and the genetics. I told you about that. We had been subdued by genetic transplantation, and now we have more aggressive potential in our personalities than you would expect. And that's not normal. That was not intended. That was an addition that some group of people thought would be a help for us to suffer. And so we do. We suffer when we aren't living in the light. We suffer when we are living in the light, but we don't suffer the same way. We are living in a mortal world, and we're here to attain, period. So when we leave, we get back to our spirit to find out what? Well, you've already attained. This is already done. History is just where the advanced spirits get further insight and experience and information by passing through and spending a few moments in one life or another life, one world and another world. It's part of the spiritual process. As much as you sit at home and watch TV, spirits are at home and they venture towards experiences that have already occurred so they can understand it on a personal level. Then they return, and then they add to that. So who you're going to meet when you return is yourself, already finished, already mastered, already complete, to a degree, because even there you're trying to advance. So what do? We find out, well, 15 minutes in the afterlife. In other words, when you get there and you're back and you've been there more than 15 minutes of what we would call time, that's 80 years in the human life. So if you only had to spend 15 minutes in your life to get the full experience of a lifetime, would you put on the goggles and go for it? Sure you would. And that's what's coming up in our life. We have the internet that's given us this bridge for collective consciousness, telepathy, and now we're having the experiences that were happening in our spiritual world are starting to occur here. We're putting on goggles, entering into a surreal or subliminal world that has been created for us. We'll call it an inner matrix. Many levels. There are soldiers who are practicing fighting wars through this kind of a network with goggles, but they're asleep and yet they're actively conscious in the dream, living in that war out. And whether they die or not doesn't matter, because then they wake up and realize what they need to do to win. And that's the whole part of the training. Well, to understand this, I'll go back and remind you, in the present, when I was looking at my life, I saw that spiritually all of my attainment came from this process of going back and forth from where we are in the high heavens into lesser submissive lives, conditioned lives, and we can pick and choose any life we want. Can you imagine how many people have lived the life of Jesus just so they could experience it? Innumerable. But it doesn't change the fact that we cannot change the past, but we can live through it and garner the experiences of it. And so the whole point is, becoming wise to our true nature helps our spirit become integrated and complete the task of living in a mortal realm in separation from the one life. So in other words, we feel disconnected, we feel alone, but it's not true. When we get home, we have a collective mind. You won't realize how brilliant you are, how everything you need to know, flash, 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 it's yours. You get to know it instantly. And now it's about creativity. It's not about earning a living and staying home and isolating your family and protecting the ones you love against those who would do harm. No, none of that exists. There is no harm. There is no fear. There are no illusions. There's only the truth, and it's revealed. It's natural, and it's authentic. And you're free. And after 20 minutes on the other side, you'll forget about this life just like a dream. You ever had a bad dream where you actually believed in the dream that, oh, this is happening? And then you realize, oh my God, thank God I woke up. I thought that was real. Our afterlife is the same thing. Now, getting back to the idea of the paradigm, a new paradigm has entered into our world. It used to be a process that took a certain amount of time through the aeons. We go from being instinctive to sensible, and then we start to develop thought. We get a mind, and we go further from thinking to concept. We live conceptual lives, and we live eventually perceptual lives where we are today. And the next step is the intuitive realized lives. So intuitively, anything you know that you've earned in life, that you've gained, that you know is true, becomes an intuition. If I know that everything's a matter of conscience and I tell my brain, okay, everything is a matter of conscience, so when I look and observe someone, I'm comparing between my rhythm and theirs. If I can notice their lack of conscience in certain areas, well, I can fill it in and say there's a solution. That's what they need to learn to complete their objective, and then they're out of here. It's that simple. An adult knows what a child has to go through to get through school. We all do, as long as you're an adult and you've had children and you've been raised the same way. It's this repeat process. In we come, gather information, make sure you understand your nature, because that's what you're here for. And when you're done, you'll find, well, this is the last time you'll ever have to work on developing a personality, because the one you enter with when you're integrated is the last one you'll ever develop, but yet it's the first one in eternity that you get to keep. That's why your spirit is very, very interested in helping you achieve the outcome while you're alive. And the new paradigm is, we don't die, get there and change. No. We're going to change while we're here alive. I know you heard stories in the Bible, it's in the book of Revelation. There are those under the altar that are saying, how long before you seek vengeance on those that have slain us, O Lord? And he says, in a while, go back, go back. Others he's given white gowns to. And that's the transformation from the causal to the etheric body, the ending of the old DNA and the restoration of their spiritual DNA. Okay? And so it's in getting rid of the lower level vibrations, frequencies that would otherwise inhibit and limit and cause problems. So the laws in one dimension are different from another, of course. And as we advance, they become more and more refined. But ultimately, we can say that our return is inevitable. Our goal of integrating our personality is not known. The majority of people do not know this. And yet there are millions and millions of spiritual adherents, individuals that are very close to integration. And it will all happen at once because we are a collective group of souls. When 10 or more achieve enlightenment, 1,000 achieve it the next day. So we're seeing a process where more and more people are starting to understand, making the transition, and the transition is happening to them inside. They're getting more sensitive to frequencies and rhythms and moods and states. And if we're in the present and we observe ourselves, we can see the transition actually taking place. We can see the removal of other tendencies and the coming in of new attributes. It's that simple. You can see the purification of your own nature occurring through this releasing process. That through grace is what we are in right now. We are under the guidance and light of the Spirit of Truth. I'll just say that. So that in this generation, right now, and for the next decade that I see, we're moving through a process that will demand that you restore your conscience, whether you like it or not. In other words, you're going to get a revelation as you proceed as a soul that will tell you where you stand with your soul. Those that act on that will be a wise move. Because when you act on it, you automatically begin to integrate and you're ready for the ascension in your body. So the body will go through a transmutation, transformation, and eventually a transfiguration. So that what we are in light bodies on the other side will happen here. We'll be able to appear in front of others. The veil will drop and we'll see people who have crossed over that are advanced souls. They will be here. And the ones that were dark, they will be gone. Because the transition takes those that are prepared for advancing into the light and move them along. Those that are less prepared, move them into greater opportunities so they can achieve the same goals. And those that choose to resist or don't want anything to do with it, they get to go their way, all by their will. And that's the paradigm. The paradigm of purity is the paradigm of love, acceptance, understanding, and incorruptibility. It's integrity filled. The paradigm of self-service is the one where we're growing and still don't know enough about ourselves, and we're interested in our desire nature giving us most of our fulfillment. And that includes even the worst, the ones that are touching on evil, to those that are evil. The further away from your soul, your conscience you go, the less tempting everything is, and the more dull and boring and dark, which they tend to favor. And those on the right, they pass into the light. They advance as souls, they advance as spirits, they advance as divine masters, they advance as ascended masters, and so on and so on and so on. And right now is a point of choice. Choose your paradigm. Now here's how I used to explain it. If you're an advanced student, you should know that your mind time, the amount of time on a clock that you spend using your mind for dark things and for light things can be evaluated. Just watch yourself over the next 5 minutes. And if you do not think something negative or dark, then you have stood in the light. If you have a negative thought, a moment of jealousy, frustration, you're moving at that moment into the dark. If you have a positive thought and you're thinking of selflessness and helping others, and you do, then you're moving into the light. So you can evaluate your life by your mind time and determine whether or not you've gained more time in the light during this life, or by sitting on the fence, you kind of went back and forth, a few minutes this way, a few minutes that way. Or you were dark and just went all the way in ignorance away from the light. You see what I'm saying? Our opportunity is a paradigm challenge. Choose the paradigm of love, which is filled with compassion, understanding, mercy, acceptance, forgiveness, beauty, beyond anything you can imagine, profound ecstasy. It's a choice. It's a choice to live by being selfless, by living with your integrity, and then moving on from there. The other choice is to advance away from yourself, to get more and more involved into the desires and the fulfillment of your life's aspirations with ill concern for humanity or no concern at all. Depends how far you go. But again, it's just the personality that's making these choices. When the light does appear, even those that are in the dark, when they see it, that'll be a confirmation of evidence to them. They may turn in that moment to decide, whoa, I had no idea that this existed. I had no confirmation. I heard that. So yeah, I think the majority of us are going to run to the light, whether we're ready for it or not, and only a few are going to want to go the other way. And that's their choice. That's what makes up this dimension for them. That's why they like it. But again, this dimension is not designed to last. And the ascension process that we're going through now, that is inevitable, will bring us all through our own choices and have us land where we want to be. What I'm saying is this. I noticed that the advanced souls were a lot like each other. The less advanced were also a lot like each other. And to those that weren't even advancing, they were very much like each other. So I coined a phrase that if you're a biker, you go to Bikerville. If you're a true lover of humanity, then you go to Humanityville. If you've made some advances, you have integrity, well, you go to Integrityville. And further and further and further into the world of purity, where we all meet and the transition out of ignorance is complete. By having purity at heart, we advance not only as a personality, integrated as a soul, we advance into the spirit and beyond. Purity, a simple word of stability and cleanliness from corruption. So, I'm incorrupt. I'm not corrupt. I've avoided the potential for corruption with all my mind, with all my heart, with all my soul. I tried to live a selfless, sharing, giving life because it was natural to me. I had compassion for others. That's an easy choice. I'd like to continue to stay this way. I have no interest in that way whatsoever. But I'm not upset at it. I'm not defined by it. But I can say I have great compassion for those who aren't able to make a conscious choice about their own soul as yet. And they are young, innocent lives. We all are. No one in this world, when you get to the other side, no one in this world is accused, charged, judged in a negative way, complained about, and punished. Somebody came up with the idea that there were two types of gods in this world. The one I met, the one I know, has proven the perfection principle to me, doubtlessly, that there is nothing but purity in the evaluation of a soul and the assessment of the universe and the actions in the universe. Purity, love, stands, holds its ground in righteousness. But it's a soft righteousness. It's something we wouldn't even begin to understand. It's the rebirth of our soul. The universe has designed this simply for us to have an experience away from our true nature. Enough so that when we return, we know much more about those who are suffering in all those realms where the soul has not yet achieved integration and ascension. So some of us will have jobs. In my case, I'll give you my example. I eventually found out that I was on what they call a Ray level attainment. I was on a Ray 2, love wisdom. So the divine feminine And the Christ principle were very important to me. We have the first principle of will, which is number 1, love, wisdom; number 2, creative intelligence; number 3. So we have Father, Mother, and Son. So I found out that through love, or what some of you would call devotion, you devote yourself to maintaining this balance, you eventually achieve a new level of integration. So let me go back and say this again. A paradigm choice is made by making a choice to live with your mind, your heart, in the attempt to discover truth, beauty, and goodness. Now imagine if only the truth, your desire for greater understanding, whether it be the sciences, chemistry, physics, whatever you study, as long as you are studying with the intent to gather more data, there's no negativity. So truth, beauty, and goodness should be filling your mind when you're not, or as a preoccupation, rather than how you can premeditate and predetermine how to take advantage of others. You see what I'm saying? What we do with our mind tells us a lot about our nature. So if we're more preoccupied with what is positive, what is objective, what is beneficial to everyone, and we have some principle and conscientiousness in our life, well, then your mind is occupied with that, and you move much faster into the process that we're talking about here as a soul. So advancing as a soul requires only that. If you live in purity, or the attempt to live in purity, some will live in integrity until they achieve that goal, and then further, preoccupy your mind with searching out truth, beauty, and goodness, along with the things that you've learned here, and you can't miss. But that's the paradigm. Is your paradigm of self-service, or selfishness, or service to others? It's a personal choice. But once you make it, you get to test it, and if you like it, you get to keep it or change it. Nothing comes to an end where you have no final choice. You always have a last choice. So at this, I'm going to close and tell you that I appreciate you coming and listening and taking in this course. I'm going to continue on with this course, but it's going to be a little bit different from now on. I wanted these first 12 to have as a basis so I could explain to anyone that was joining the channel that this was the process that you would run into, and these were the most outstanding attributes that you'd want to consider as an integrated personality. And from that, we'll move on. So please write to me, email me, get in touch with me, subscribe, leave a good remark, if you will. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. Have a great day and gracious peace. Bye for now.